Hi, everybody. Welcome to the May Culturama event, Publishers Workshop with the Pomona Valley Review. I am Lloyd Aquino, and I am the Culturama coordinator. This is really a really cool event, and I'll turn things over to the editors of Pomona Valley Review in just a quick minute. This is just a really cool event for me personally because it's kind of a full circle moment. I was one of the student editors that helped to start Pomona Valley Review at Cal Poly back in 2002. And helped out with the first couple of issues, editing wise. So to be able to introduce them to you is just a really cool full circle moment for me. So I'm going to turn this over to the editors of the Pomona Valley Review.
Thank you so much for that. And it's really wonderful to be here with all of you. I'm going to quickly share my slides. Let's see. There is a small party going on outside, so if you hear, they're having a good time. Okay, so let me minimize my screen there. So hi everyone, my name is Rachel, and I am currently the editor-in-chief of Pomona Valley Review. Today's workshop will be going over general information for our publication, the history of it, and I'll be introducing you to, oh, I'm sorry, that popped off there. I'll be introducing you to our past and current editors for a discussion about some pieces that we've selected, and then we'll break apart for the dedicated workshops. So really quickly, who we are. Today, we have Dr. Ryan Liak and Amanda Riggle, and they both have been working on PVR for quite a while, and it's really exciting to have them here today. They'll be hosting the poetry workshop, and I'll go over the history shortly after the slide, but I just want to get everybody's names out there. For our issue 16 current masthead, that's myself, Rachel Drosovich, and I also currently am heading the fiction section. Our managing editor couldn't be here today, but her name is Cassandra Lang, apologies, and she is heading up the poetry section, which was handed over from Amanda. We have Mariana Trujillo Marquez, and she is our lead editor. She's also here today, and she will be heading up the art section workshop, along with Erica Zamora Reyes, who is our art primary editor and fiction editor. So these are the names that you'll see today. So really quickly, history of Pomona Valley Review, like Lloyd mentioned, he worked on it when it first started. It was established by Dr. Faith Barrett back in 2002, and it was a Cal Poly student production. So everything was centralized amongst the students. And at that point, they actually had print publications, which was fantastic. And if you ever get to see those in person, they're very cool too. And there was a sort of a dip in between publications between 2002 to 2010. So once around 2010 hit, Dr. Ryan Liak, who's here today, Ryan, he led a revitalization of Pomona Valley Review, and that was also split between, as I understand, print and online publications. And it, again, was a graduate student run production. And currently, 20 years now, it has been going, which is exciting to say out loud. We're currently an online publication, and we've moved away from being a part of the actual English and Modern Languages department at Cal Poly, but our base really grows and takes from the graduate department. So no matter what team we currently have in succession, we always want to make sure that the graduate students in Cal Poly still have a chance to contribute to and create the production as it goes. So it's still an extension of the program. Our current editors per section are largely drawn from the graduate department there. And we've shifted away from the print publication, but we are an open access online publication. And so everyone can actually view it online. I'll post links as once everything ends. So it's in one central location for everybody to actually go check that out. So really quickly about our publication info. Again, we're an annual production. So our current timeline at this point is we typically publish within August, and July is around the review period where everybody receives the decisions. And what I think is really cool about Pomona Valley Review is that we don't have a set theme per issue. So as we're creating and curating and discussing the pieces that we receive as submissions, once we start piecing those together, generally we come together with a theme towards the end of it. And a lot of Pomona Valley Review's works centralizes, identity and really deep discourse, negotiations, and discussions around current issues, systemic problems. And so I think that's a really great way to open the field to everybody who wants to submit their work across an array of genres and themes, but also have it so that there's typically cohesion amongst the pieces that do come together and create their own sort of discourse per issue. We also ask for first serial rights. So what this means is we typically ask that your work, if you're submitting a piece, say a poetry piece, that it's not published elsewhere, so that we have the first serial rights to publish that. However, if you do submit something to us and are doing a simultaneous submission elsewhere, and say it's accepted and you want to withdraw, you're more than welcome to withdraw. You can email us, you can withdraw automatically through Submittable. I'll also show you our Submittable page on, I believe, the next slide, but the link is there. It's pomonavalleyReview.submittable.com/submit. And there you'll find all of the categories that I'll also go over briefly in the next slide. Submission guidelines. Generally speaking, we ask for single line spacing. Headers, if you include a header on each piece submitted, then include your name and email on each page. So we have that. Each submission should only be titled with the official title of your piece, name not required, as we do ask that everybody submits a cover letter with their bio. So we'll know who it is and whose work is attached to whose name. There we go. So the works that we accept, we have art. You can submit up to 5 pieces in formats JPEGs, Word, or PDF. And for art, we specifically ask that title each submission with the title of the piece itself. So if it's untitled, you can simply include that in the title. Fiction and creative nonfiction. So very recently, in the examples that I'll show personally for the fiction section later on, as well as in the workshop section, are from PVR 14. But when we were going through PVR 15 last year, we decided that creative nonfiction, there was an interest in people asking whether or not we accepted creative nonfiction. And we really wanted to extend that, especially as we were curating pieces that were written during the pandemic, sort of just right on the cusp of the pandemic start, and again throughout, that there was, I think, a really high need for expression during that period, which would lend itself very well to creative nonfiction. So we've added that as a category for what we accept. And for both fiction and creative nonfiction, it's up to 2 pieces per section. Format we accept as Word, and the word count, we max it out at 6,000 words per piece. And for poetry, you can select up to 3 pieces to submit. Again, the format is Word, and the word count is 1,000 max per piece. And creative nonfiction, I think, very much extends to the poetry section as well, creative nonfiction. And we also really encourage simultaneous submissions. So if you have, say, 2 pieces of fiction and 3 pieces of poetry that you want to submit, we encourage that wholeheartedly. We love reviewing everybody's work and seeing how each piece really contributes to the eventual overall production that is going to be issue 16. So all works encouraged. So really quickly, if you've not worked through Submittable before, this is what our Submittable will look like when, I'll post the link again, but this is what it'll look like when you go to our site. It's a bit squished because of sizing, but on the left side, there is going to be our general guidelines. This includes, again, guidelines, the timetables, the publishing rights, and additional guidelines. This will cover everything that I'm covering here, some in more depth. So if you have questions about that, you can visit our site or you can email me directly, and I will also include my email at the end of this presentation. When you do submit the works on the same page as what looks like on the left side, below that, there will be per section for short fiction, creative nonfiction, artwork, and poetry. And if you click on the caret for next to guidelines, that'll also give you all the information I've been giving currently, and it'll be easy to access. So it's all in one place should you have any questions or concerns about that. So now what I want to do is switch it over to pieces that we've decided as editors we've enjoyed in the past and we want to share with you, to talk about why those pieces were possibly included within it, the structure, anything that we've definitely had an interest in over the years, so that you have an idea of what we've accepted, but also not as a restriction, because again, we accept all sorts of work, and we always look forward to anything new that comes through our Submittable. So right now, I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, and he will talk about James Hickson's Haunted Barn, as well as the next slide.
All right, thanks, Rachel. And yeah, and thanks, Lloyd, too, for working so hard on Culturama. This is sort of a full circle moment for me as well, although it's not quite as full circle as it is for Lloyd, I guess. He's got me by about 8 years there. But yeah, I did bring the journal back into production in 2010, and so it's been 12 years. And yeah, I was editor-in-chief from PVR 5 through PVR 11. So this James Hickson was a really important one for me. And actually, if you would like to look at it more closely, I did put it into its own little PDF. So I'm going to put that in the chat so you can download it. Because James Hickson, this was a critical poem because we ended up inviting him, as well as another poet, to an in-person event. I think it was our first in-person event held at Cal Poly as part of the Lingua Franca series. And so we had him speak to a rather large group of students and faculty, and he read several of his poems. And I thought that this one, why we like James Hickson's work kind of all together, and this one in particular, is that it was Pomona based. So we get a lot of poetry and work from kind of all over the nation and all over the world, but James's work is really anchored in Pomona. And so if you look at some of the lines he's referring to, right, at the northern end of the old orange grove, the huge and weathered barn waited like a monolith from ancient times. So he's referencing, of course, Pomona's history as this kind of large collection of orange groves. He references also the Pomona Valley Hospital, the gift shop, right? And some of the kind of scenery that he'd grown up around. And the poem kind of, you can read, I'm not gonna obviously read the whole thing, but you can read it for yourself and see kind of the progression of it. Because as he goes toward the end, right, and you see kind of this barn, this old weathered barn, get bulldozed and razed, right, and it's gone without a sign. You see kind of the change, I guess, in Pomona's history over time, and of course, even the orange groves after many years, right, have been, most of which have come down as well. And so I just really appreciated it, and the last lines I like quite a bit. I'll read the last stanza. I mean, the following year, my father bought a house on Yorba Drive, at one edge of that orange grove, close enough to that old barn that its vestige flickered on my bedroom wall at night during rare thunderstorms, and names and dates appeared. So there's a real sense of history, I think, in James's work. And I think it's one I selected for today because it showcases the way in which PBR has privileged work, of its quality work, of course, that foregrounds our kind of locale in our history as an area. So. And this one is a really wonderful piece of art. Actually, this is the cover art for PBR 6. The last one was for PBR 10, but this is the cover art. You can see, you can still download it online. And if you want a fuller image, I could put that in the chat. So Anna Karen, we chose this for the cover art. I think this really resonated with us at the time as students. Chris Barstad was the managing editor, but it really spoke to all the editors at the time. And, you know, we were all graduate students. And so, you know, there was a, if you've been a student, right, you'll know that there's this, especially in English or creative writing, you're sort of hounded with text all the time. And for Cal Poly in particular, you know, many of us were first generation college students, including myself, from working class backgrounds. And so many of us were kind of, you know, as graduate students in particular, separated from family in very significant ways and from sort of just personal relationships in general. And so the books, right, the books were kind of the only things that for a large period kind of embraced us. And I thought back to this because in 2010, I was a graduate student and I was also reading this book, which some of you may have read, Writing Permitted in Designated Areas Only, by Linda Brodkey. And she has this chapter called Writing on the Bias that's very famous in composition and English studies. And she's talking about her own kind of history as a student coming from a working class background. And she's talking about the books, right, that always surround her. And she just says on page 40 that the books, are tokens of the absent family and friends whose voices have been muted by space and time. If so, it gives me a measure of satisfaction to believe that this lifelong habit simulates reading as I learned it at home, that even as I read the literature that took me so far from home, I have been protecting myself from total class annihilation. So it was a sort of very resonant and I thought appropriate image for the cover art.
Sorry, I'm muting myself there. Okay, I'm going to now turn it over to Mariana and Erica. They'll be talking about two pieces of art that became the covers actually of PVR 14 and PVR 15. So Erica and Mariana, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi, everybody. So I've been with PVR for the past 2 issues, issue 15 and our current issue that we're still working on for issue 16. This was a cover for the issue that I actually looked at as to kind of go over as I started off with PVR, look at the work that they've been producing. And we really like this one, especially because this issue for PBR 14 came out during the pandemic in 2020. And we can see the watercolors and then the bird, right, being pulled by the cage. So that was very reminiscent of the pandemic and the themes that were produced within that issue that year. So this was something that we really liked. And we also wanted to at like the different varieties of different artworks that we accept. And this is one of them. This is like artwork between like digital art, photography, and as the one that Ryan was just showing to us as well. And this is Untitled. This is for the issue that I actually worked on. And this one is composed of charcoal and acrylic color. So this one I thought was really cool. And I think the colors are something that really just pulled me to the image. And then just the composition and the structure of this image, how it uses different lines to create this picture of an individual. And yeah, I thought it was really neat. I actually wasn't too sure that I couldn't really tell for the charcoal, but I can see the lines that create the shape of the man in the image. I can see that how it's happening, and then the strokes with the acrylic happening around. And this was, yeah, our cover art for 15. So those are like the different varieties that we show. Sorry.
Just to jump in real quick, if you're ever interested in having something considered for the cover, it needs to be this orientation, like the portrait orientation, just because we don't actually cut up the artwork. It has to be able to fit the cover in order to be the cover.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Amanda. That's very important. Okay, so I'm going to take over really quickly for the fiction section. So the pieces that I'm going to share, they're two pieces, and they were both from PVR 14, which is, I guess we titled the unofficial official pandemic issue, as it was at the start of that when we were really going into things. The first one I want to share is by Ari Fitzgibbon. It's called Laundry Days. And small shout out, Ari is currently a Mill student, so it's my alma mater. So I was very excited when I saw this, but I think when we were going through this issue that there was a lot of thematic and very deep introspection on who we were as people at that time. So the pieces sort of reflect that, I think. And this one very much is talking about the questioning of the self, and for this as a sort of genderqueer exploration of that. There was that element of unfamiliarity, a sort of dissociation with the self. And by the end of the piece, I only am showing the first page of it. So if you're interested, I'll put the actual PDFs into the chat. But by the end of it, there was a sort of reconciliation with representing and identifying the self through that unfamiliarity. And so connecting those two pieces, I think, were really interesting, but also reflective of not only this work, but a lot of other works happening throughout PVR issue 14. And then very quickly, Daniel Spielberger, Banderitas, is another piece that I believe this is classified as fiction, so I will continue to say as such, but I think it also does work to structurally thinking about creative nonfiction, because at this time we hadn't really begun accepting creative nonfiction. But this one, I think, is a really cool way of splitting up the exploration again of the self and family connection through space and time by sectioning off the entire piece within ones, twos, threes, everything consecutively. So although the memories in this piece progress, some of them might go back in time. So it plays with the idea that although we may go back and view our memories within certain successions, it's not necessarily that those memories exist as such. The more we review them, the more they kind of blend with other ones, they stretch out, they influence the following ones, previous ideas that we had in other memories. So the connection is consecutive. However, the actual content itself throughout this piece, I believe, is calling into question how we negotiate those and how it continues to reflect and influence the way we then negotiate any other memories that relate to each piece. So like in Banderitas, the number one, it begins a mountain of cloth, a constant clatter of honking and screaming, angry drivers and vendors notifying everyone in a 2-block vicinity of the latest bargainings. So it's very rooted, again, in that sort of visceral moment of someone's life. And as it continues on, it's still recalling site and physical location, but within those sites and physical locations, it pulls apart those sensations and connections to objects that we might have found insignificant at the time, but yet it resonates in the current. And so again, recalling memory, what really resonates with us, what mundane object might actually be a placeholder for something. And so this piece, I believe, really spoke to that. And again, being when the pandemic started and everyone went into, lockdown, that I think there was a very interesting thread throughout this that helped us reflect on our connection within the spaces that we inhabit. And that's definitely something that has been going on since then. So this is why I chose this piece. Yes, so those are the two. And I believe our next is just Q&A. So generally right now, I wanted to open the floor for anybody who has questions about what we went over. If you have questions before we decide to break out into our poetry, fiction, and art workshops that we can answer. And if not, you're more than welcome to email me. I have my email down there at arlenj45@gmail.com. And I'll put that in the chat as well if you need to reach me. So I'll open the floor up to anybody. And if you have questions specifically related to breakout rooms, we can definitely answer those there as well. Okay, let's see. Yes, I will put those PDFs right now. Okay, I believe the Spielberger and the Fitzgibbon pieces are in there.
And then I did drop a question to get things started because I generally do that when I'm part of a panel. So this is to all editors. So how do you define like good art? And that's in any medium that we kind of accept at the journal. So I'll pause and I'll think about my answer too and see if anybody wants to jump in.
Why don't you ask a hard question, Amanda? I think that was, as a rhetorician, like I always think that, I mean, you could tell as part of my own, the way that I talked about the two pieces from James Hickson and Ana Karen Munoz is that it's timely, right? It sort of speaks to the time and place. It resonates with a certain historical moment and a certain geography in the case of James Hickson. And in the case of a sort of I guess, phenomenological experience as a graduate student in the case of Ana Karen. And so it speaks to a certain time and place. Although the question of whether there's anything good or quality about art that transcends time and space is one of those Platonic questions, right? So maybe Amanda can help us. The Shakespeare. What about Shakespeare, right, Amanda? Transcends time and space. So.
I mean, my dissertation is called "Abolish Shakespeare," so I have, opinions about like him being used as a source of perpetuating white supremacy in Western culture. But to think about art and time and location and in response to something, I think is a really good way of starting. I also think it needs to invoke something. It can provoke something. We do publish works that have been provocative in the past. I have one that I think was from PVR 12 or 13, which I really liked, that wasn't included, where it was somebody who had survived the AIDS epidemic in like New York, and they were just kind of raging against like Nancy and Ronald Reagan, and I loved it. But it doesn't just have to be like provocative to be invocative, right? So it makes you feel what the author is trying to transmit. And so that idea comes a bit from like Slofsky, whose name I'm not saying correct, but this idea that art makes the thing that you are describing more apparent to somebody. So if you are being evocative of a feeling, you're trying to make everybody feel it. If you're trying to describe a stone, everybody should have a visual image of the same stone that you are describing. And I think part of why sometimes like we favor local works is because it's evocative to us. It's like, I see that street, I know Yorba Drive, I could still see the orange groves that were part of like the counties, right? So sometimes it's very dependent upon audience, what is like good or not good, because it depends on kind of like what you can connect to. But just that, as somebody who's making art, being able to kind of transmit those, and maybe not a universal, but maybe a local, or to at least like the audience that you're projecting to, really does help it kind of like connect and help those things that you're trying to express be received, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think jumping off of that, that's a really wonderful way of explaining things. I think it goes along with there's some thought, I guess, through Gadamer. He says the modes of realization of understanding is interpretation. And I think with the pieces that I shared, as well as pieces that have been shared, for me personally, if there is something that is an exploration of, oh gosh, what's my train of thought? Grounding your perception in the appeal of, you know, what is human, the humanity and humanization of anything really, is personally something that I think centralizes my idea, at least, of what is quote good art, because there's something there that isn't necessarily creating a universal, like Amanda said, but there is an interpretation that inspires, and I think can potentially become relatable through the actual engagement that occurs when you read, when you see something and you're talking to other people about it, or even when you're, you know, talking to yourself and trying to put yourself in the place of that piece, but also understanding where the boundaries are between your own personal discourses that inform who you are and what might be informing this piece, and how those kind of butt up against each other or complement or inform one another as you progressively think about the things that the piece is trying to evoke or invoke over time. You know, if you come away from it, if you go back to it, it's those things for me personally that I believe the works that the issues that I've worked on so far have centered around, that I'm very interested in seeing. And you know, it can come through an array of a lot of different things. There's flash fiction, experimental, anything, as long as there's certain threads that pull on those questions of, you know, of the humanity within it, and recognizing the humanity of, say, any objects or peoples or anybody that you're the subject that you're writing about. So that would be for me. I don't want to throw Mariana or Erica under the bus for the question, but if you guys have anything, go ahead.
I think, yeah, for art, very similar, right? How it tells a story. And I think because it's very visual for art, the artwork, the first thing that we do, it's like, do I like this or do I not? And then once we kind of break from whether it's like pretty looking or not, we kind of get more into the composition of how it's telling that story. Even if at first it wasn't very resonant with you. And I think something very interesting, I was having a conversation with Erica, and she said, how is it telling the story, or how is it showing a moment? And I think that's very in like that resonates very in the point of view, especially in photography. We were looking at some of the photography that has been published, and that sort of view that the artist is giving us, that perception of what is it telling us. And I think that draws us a lot into some of the artworks that we've chosen. And again, the one that we showed with the bird for issue 14, that one's very resonant of the pandemic 2020 and the bird trying to free itself. And we still see like those colors that give a little bit of comforting feelings. Because I think artwork does, it's a lot based on like emotions, as well as like what kind of scenery is it giving us to the viewer. Yeah.
I think it's kind of hard to really pinpoint what good art is. I think just for me in general, I think if I can get past just how it looks and actually really contemplate what I'm looking at, what it's telling me, something that kind of makes me reflect not just what the art is doing or what the artist is saying, and kind of even moving beyond even the techniques or the medium of it. For me, that's a strong piece because it's kind of making me think about things not just from the art perspective of it. And it's very dependent on the medium you're using, right? Not everything is going to be translated. You know, we're not going to look at a photograph in the same way that we look in a painting or digital art. It's very dependent, and it's just it's very dependent, and the techniques are different. So you really can't have a standard of like, this is what I'm going in with. This is what we go in looking at the art, and this is if it's ticking off. You know, it's not how we do it. It's just a matter of what's being said, what's being reflected, and I think in general, if it's moving enough, right?
Those are all really awesome answers. Let's see. It's not the invasive you have. Okay, so a question from Donna. Though PVR is not theme-based, do the issues have a thread that connects the art, poetry, fiction, and creative nonfiction together? So that's a really wonderful question. And I think we can also answer based on Ryan and Amanda's experiences with this, given that they've worked on previous issues. So if you guys are willing to start out with that, then we can answer successively.
Yeah, I think it connects to what you were saying, Rachel, about looking at seeing that the pieces of the work come in. And that's what happened, I think, with kind of, you know, each of the cover arts as we were looking at, I mean, with the Anna Karen, and then also the 2014 or the 2020 PVR 14 issue, is it speaks to, I guess, to combine the answers, right? It speaks to the time and place in like an evocative, maybe also provocative way. And so the theme, there's not always like one strict theme. I think the pandemic maybe was a was a case where more kind of came together, obviously, because that was just dominating the moment. But there's often like emergent themes, and that will often make it so that when we arrange the issue, there'll be like a piece of art. I remember there was a story one time that was about like it was a fictional story of one of our really great writers. His name is escaping me at the moment, but Frank Scozzari, I think, and he had a story about a lion hunter, and we had also just kind of happened to receive an image, like a portrait of a lion. So like, wow, that's, you know, so we put those together, and so sometimes there'll be more direct themes that correlate some of the images and the stories and the poetry. Oftentimes there's more so like several themes that kind of run across how the issue gets laid out across the images and stories.
Yeah, I always think of layout kind of like making a playlist, because we'll have maybe things that go really well together. If we have a piece that doesn't seem to go with anything, that is something we do think about. Like if there's nothing to pair it with, if there's no like story that goes with that poem thematically, if it stands on its own. But that's actually pretty rare, because a lot of times art is created in response to something, and a lot of times we'll be responding to similar threads and similar themes. So like the last issue, PBR 15, still during the pandemic, we saw like hopelessness, but we also saw hope. We saw people bonding more with family, but then people who are kind of like struggling to find that connection. And so even though we kind of had these almost kind of like binary oppositions, we had groups of them. And so they were able to kind of like flow together. And something we did as an editorial board was put people in primary positions. So like lead art editor or first primary art, and then a secondary section, which would be like, if you're doing poetry, then you also do art or short story. And that way you can kind of see those themes throughout the section. And it helps us kind of like curate and be like, oh, this poem is good. And it actually goes really well with this piece of artwork. So for example, somebody submits 5 pieces of art and we decide like we have a lot of art, so we might only be taking 3. If there's a portrait of a lion from that artist, we might select that over like a portrait of a gopher, like because it'll go with that piece that has the lion. But yeah, it is very much like making a playlist. So I have a music background from way back when, so that's what I think of it like.
Yeah, I'll actually end it there because we have, I know this ends at 1:30, so I had initially planned for a bit longer for workshop, but let's get to those workshops. So what we'll do is separate breakout rooms for fiction, creative nonfiction, poetry, and art. And the workshops will vary based on who's organizing them. So there might be more structural talk, there might be more prompts, but generally we want to open the floor to anybody here that is comfortable with sharing their work, potentially for a submission to PVR, so that we can give feedback, we can discuss anything as a group within those breakout rooms. So we'll do that right now. Let me set those up. Participants choose. Stick with me for 1 second. I'm just renaming the breakout rooms. Depending on how much time we have as well, I was hoping we might get to come together a little bit at the end, but I also want to reserve as much time possible for everybody. So maybe in the last few minutes, we might come back together and say one general goodbye, but I will open the rooms now. I believe, okay, there we go. I will join here.
Edna, if you go to the bottom, actually, did anything pop up on your screen, Edna?
Sorry, I
Did, any-
didn't.
did anything pop up on your screen about breakout rooms?
No.
Okay, then on the bottom of your Zoom screen, you
Yeah.
see something. You may not see breakout rooms immediately, so you might have to click on more on the bottom.
Oh, breakup rooms. Yeah, I can see breakup rooms.
Okay, if you click on breakout rooms, it should show you the 3 rooms that are available for
Okay.
4 rooms, 3 rooms that are available. Yeah, and then you can pick one to join.
Okay. Okay.
Does anyone else need help? Okay.
Larry, Larry, can you hear me? This is Donna Phillips.
Hey,
Hi. Yeah, I'm having trouble getting into the breakout rooms. I clicked on breakout rooms and
no,
then I
which one would you like to go to? I think I can assign you to it.
fiction and creative nonfiction. And
Okay.
then I clicked on it and for some reason it's not taking me there.
Okay, let me try it this way. Give me a second.
Okay, got it. Join breakout room. We are, okay, got it. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate that because I couldn't get in. I don't know why. Thanks.
No problem. Mary, let me know if you need any help.
Hi again, Lloyd.
Hello.
Question really quickly. If we submit a work, are we able to use like an artist name or an alias, or do you want like our legal name?
You can use an alias. We've done aliases before. Yeah, just make sure you're clear. If you submit it and it has your name attached, then you give us a different name in the bio. Sometimes we don't always see that. So just make sure it's very clear that you want a different name if you're using your original name somewhere.
Yeah, especially if your submittable account has your legal name, then it's can be a problem. So, but we always go with the bio, I think. So, and you can always send us an email just to verify.
Yeah, I wonder if we're gonna get creative nonfiction, just because they probably have like a lot more pages to read than the rest of us.
That's very cool that PVR is doing creative nonfiction, because when I was editor-in-chief, we didn't do that. And we always wanted to expand eventually, and it didn't happen while I was editor-in-chief, but that's very cool. So another genre opened up.
Yeah, last year we had a really strong creative nonfiction piece, and it was pretty clear that it needed to be marked creative nonfiction for it to keep its impact. And so we're like, yeah, we'll make it green, fits with the color theme. So
There you go.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and another question I have is, are we limited to submitting only one form? Like if you submit poetry, are you only allowed to submit poetry, or can you do like poetry and fiction as well?
You can do both. You can submit to all three sections if you'd like. It's just when they do considerations, if everybody loves your artwork and everybody loves your poetry and everybody loves your story, they're going to have to like fight over what gets included, because we try to, I think, limit it to 3 pieces by an artist in like overall, not just per section.
Yeah, I don't know if I want to start wrapping things up, or do we want to wait a little bit more for everyone else?
We can all just go into the fiction room and say hi and see what they're doing.
That might be a way to do it, although it won't get recorded. That's the only thing. So
Oh, okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure if the breakout rooms were recorded.
I don't think they are. I'd have to check when the recording comes in. But yeah, I don't think they are.
I'll just jump in there and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Ryan, by the way, I'm glad that you're joining us this fall at PEMLA, because it'll be my first time running it, and I'm like, I'm a little nervous. So thank you for coming along.
Sure, no worries. Yeah, it's my pleasure. I mean, we started the first PVR panel. Gosh, I can't remember now. I think it was the last year or two that I was editor-in-chief, and it went, yeah, really well. And I think we've done one ever since. I mean, I think Amanda did the next one. I don't think. Do you remember, Amanda, if Ian Cressman, when he was the 1 year he was editor-in-chief, if we had a PVR panel?
I think we did, but he didn't head it. I think I might have with John Danho.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so it's my pleasure, and I'll be there I'm also chairing a panel at PAMLA, so I'll be there for quite a while.
Yep, I think I'm chairing one of the Drama and Society panels, and I submitted a paper to the Shakespeare one, and they haven't talked to anybody yet. So, yeah.
I don't know if Mariana already spoke about it, but PVR will also be there, and Mariana will be chairing that panel for us. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining. Apologies for that one moment. We got very caught up in sharing our works, which was awesome. Thank you all for coming today and listening to us talk, listening to us talk about craft, hearing your works. It was really great. And if you do, again, have any other questions, feel free to email myself. I believe, oh, sorry. Oh, that's Connie. I believe my email is in the comments already, but one last time, let me just type it in. And my full name just in case. Make sure I'm not just submitting that to Donna because I've done that before through messages. Okay, so outside of that, again, thank you, Ryan, Amanda, Mariana, Erica. Thank you for your time. I was really excited to do this, so I'm excited to see that everybody here was joining in and just as enthusiastic. And if anyone else has anything to add, feel free to, but thank you so much for joining us on a Saturday afternoon of all times.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you all.
I think that went really well.
I'm glad.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Lloyd.
Sure.
All right, have a good one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.